I try to imagine a fellow smarter than myself, and then I try to think, what would he do?
Charge up your axons, ready your receptors, and shift your lobes into upper beta phase. You are listening to Smart Drug Smarts, the podcast dedicated to helping you optimize your brain with the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience, nootropics, and psychopharmacology. Hello and welcome to Smart Drug Smarts, the 2013 first edition. We're in episode 5 right now and flipped over into a new year, and a new year in which I very much intend to actually stick to a weekly production schedule for this podcast. Feel free to hold my feet to the fire on that one. If you're a fan of the podcast and you see me slipping and it becomes 10 days or 14 days or something like that, then definitely shoot me an email, jesse@smartdrugsmarts.com, and tell me that I am a big lump of turd and need to take some modafinil and get on making another podcast, because I really want to be doing this weekly. Anyway, this week, if you stick around till the end of the episode, in the Ruthless Listener Retention gimmick, I'm going to tell you about the only known nootropic that can also prevent unwanted pregnancy. But before we get to that, our main interview this week, this is actually an interview that I did before the interview that was done for episode 1. This was an interview that I did with my friend Gabe Lee, who happened to be in the same town as me at the time, and I just figured, hey, let's stick a microphone in front of this guy and have a conversation. This was before I knew all the vagaries of podcasting and how to get good audio and stuff, so it's going to be a little bit technically rough, but hopefully there will be some good information in there, and we'll get back to our more slightly polished format next week. Oh, and why is Gabe Lee relevant to Smart Drug Smarts, you might ask? That's a fair question. Gabe is the creator of a product called BrainStack. BrainStack is a non-prescription nutritional supplement that has a variety of different nootropics sort of mixed together in amounts that Gabe thought would be appropriate for his own brain and that he decided to share with the world at large. And so I thought it would be really interesting to hear his story of how he went from somebody who is told you need some drugs for your brain to somebody who starts taking some drugs for his brain to somebody who's like, wow, I'm going to start selling drugs for other people's brains. And anyway, interesting story. I hope you agree, and we'll hear it in just a moment. But before we get to that, let's jump on to This Week in Neuroscience. Announcer guy? Smart Drug Smarts, This Week in Neuroscience.
Okay, got some good news for all the oregano fans out there. There are apparently some naturally occurring oregano oils that are beneficial to brain health. And you can get them just by eating good old-fashioned oregano, so not a particularly hard-to-come-by smart drug as smart drugs go. This placebo-controlled crossover clinical study published published in 2011 in the British Journal of Nutrition, looked at 20 healthy men between the ages of 18 and 45 and showed a notable increase in the alpha-1 and beta-1 brainwaves these guys were displaying after eating some oregano oils. Alpha-1 brainwaves are associated with things we like relaxation, improved learning, concentration, and decreased anxiety, and beta-1 brainwaves are famous for their increased states of alertness and cognitive processing. So all good stuff. The apparent mechanism behind all these positive results and oregano oils is that the oregano oils are inhibiting the reuptake and degradation of the neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. All big names in the neurotransmitter world. If you do any sort of brain reading, you'll remember that, dopamine is the reward chemical that our brain gives us pretty much anytime you're feeling like, that felt nice. It's because your brain is releasing a little bit of dopamine to reward you for whatever sort of biologically programmed behavior you're participating in. Anyway, so yeah, all good things coming from good old natural oregano oils. This study was conducted by DSM Nutritional Products, who are apparently producing some sort of product based on oregano oil extracts, but according to the study, there's nothing that you couldn't do just by pouring a whole slew of oregano on your food too. So that's a little neurotransmitter tip for the Italian chefs out there.
Smart Drug Smarts.
Okay, so before we move on to the actual interview for this episode, I wanted to take a moment to kind of, I guess, call everybody's attention to an issue which was brought up by a listener to the podcast. Wrote something on the blog post for last week's episode, which, it made me think a lot. And so I wanted to sort of, comment on, in the publicest forum I've got, which at this point is episode 5. Anyway, Andrew thought that I should have really been quite a bit more aggressive, I guess, in my interview tactics with last week's guest, Samantha Diavatis of the Zengar company that makes the product Neuroptimal, the neurofeedback product. Basically, he didn't think her answers were credible or convincing, and that I should have kind of jumped down her throat a little bit more. And to a certain extent, I really agree that I probably did give a free pass on some things that I didn't feel like were terribly convincing answers.
And I've got no excuse for that other than say that, I'm not a professional interviewer. I've been doing this for, 4 or 5 episodes now. So I'm still kind of, figuring out my own style on doing these interviews and, what sort of environment I'm providing both for the guests on the show and also the listeners to the show. First and foremost, I want this podcast to be about providing really, really valuable information to everybody, myself included. Just because something is talked about on this podcast does not mean that Jesse is pointing at it and waving pom-poms and doing a ringing endorsement. It's something that I think is interesting and that I want to learn more about, and that I think the audience might find interesting too. Andrew called the episode a woo-woo episode, which of course is like, oh no, man, woo-woo. I don't want to be called a woo-woo. I'm a computer science guy. We're the opposite of woo-woo. But anyways, I thank you, Andrew, for taking the time to write. It's awesome to know that, I've got listeners that are going to take me to task when they feel like something isn't right. I would love to continue to get feedback like this. It definitely has made me think about it a lot, which is why I'm waxing on about this now. My email for anybody that has comments, you can email me directly at jesse@smartdrugsmarts.com. That's Jesse, Jesse. It is not short for Jessica. There are no I's, no Y's, no anything like that. But anyway, so I just want to reemphasize that there's going to be a ton of stuff on this podcast that I think is interesting, that I think you might find interesting. Some of it's going to be very subjective, and even the most objective stuff that we can find in the realms of the brain is still pretty subjective, because the fact is, it's like the brain is the most complex thing in the known universe. It is a big, mysterious organ, and we're a long way from having the thing all figured out yet. So as rigorous as we can possibly be in this podcast, we're going to try to straddle a balance between something that is listenable to the layperson, that doesn't necessarily have a full-on neuroscience background, something that I can participate in as a host that does not necessarily have a full-on neuroscience background, and something that'll still be useful for people that are looking for ways to enhance their own brain, whether with chemicals or otherwise, and are looking for accessible and good information about ways to do that. So anyway, that's my little spiel. Would love comments. Fire away.
Okay, I'm here with Gabe Lee, the, co-creator of a neural supplement called BrainStack. Tell me, first of all, just how you got interested in perfecting your own brain chemistry.
First of all, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate this. How I got started? Well, originally had been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder 3 years ago or so. And so I was constantly looking to improve my focus, right? Like be able to focus on one single task and not be bouncing around all over the place. And so it originally started with that, just looking at fixing the attention deficit disorder.
A question about that real quick. I mean, you're not like a spring chicken. Like, how is it that, in your mid-20s or whatever, you found out only then that you had attention deficit disorder?
It's one of those things I don't really know that, I'm not really sure if I believe that it actually exists, right? It's just like this classification that we use to describe the behavior of certain human beings. Someone ended up telling me, hey, I think you might be ADD. And then I started researching it and going into it, and I'm like, man, this really describes me very well. Like, on the inability to focus, switching tasks constantly, never finishing a task, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. So that led you down the path of wanting to improve your own focus, and where'd you go from there?
Started taking Adderall, getting lots of work done, was extremely focused. It works really, really well, but there are some negative side effects with it, of course, and that's eventually what led me to looking into alternatives, other nootropics, other things that can help with focus and memory formation.
For those people that aren't familiar with Adderall, and actually I'm one of them, how would you describe sort of the subjective experience of that? What did it feel like to be taking it?
You feel, I guess the best way to describe it for me is that you feel kind of like a laser, like your focus becomes extremely narrow, and you can block out anything else and just laser focus on one thing at a time, right?
Wow.
It literally, like, you feel like you're more intelligent, your memory's on point, your focus is on point, but it's also euphoric as well, right? So you kind of feel overconfident, you kind of feel like this, this high almost, right?
Yeah.
That comes from amphetamine salts, right? So it releases like a surge of dopamine and you start to feel really, really good. So it's like a combined, like, feeling really good with being able to focus really well. That'd be the best way to describe it.
Sounds kind of like a miracle drug, except that there's downsides as far as like long-term effects.
Right, yeah. So for me, I started experiencing increased anxiety, irritability, anger, and loss of appetite. I wasn't hungry at all. I was losing weight. weighed like 6'2", weighed like 160 pounds at the time.
Wow. So how did the anger and the euphoria go together? Were they at the same time, or were you? Or so I'm like, how do you be euphoric and angry at once?
No, the euphoria comes on pretty quickly, and then as the drug would taper off, toward the end of the day, I noticed myself becoming irritable and angry. So I think that's a common thing with having too much dopamine or being too sensitive to dopamine. Those types of things are common, those side effects.
So you started looking elsewhere. Where'd that take you?
So just doing different internet searches for like alternatives to Adderall and just different drugs or cognitive supplements to help with focus and memory. Stumbled across this whole industry of nootropics, of different things that you can take to improve certain aspects of your cognitive capabilities. And
how did you decide which of these was for you at that point? Did you kind of order the phone book and start taking all of them at once? Did you pick one and go with that? Like what was sort of your weeding process, I guess?
Honestly, just looking at popular stacks amongst other people, like what are other people taking already? What's working well for other people?
Gotcha. And stack in this case is kind of jargon for a group of vitamins or supplements that you take together?
Yeah, it's a combination of different supplements, cognitive enhancement supplements, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just going to try to keep it not super jargony for people who are like, what the heck is this stuff? Who are these people? So you started designing your own stack based on, the internet research you'd done, and, what happened next? I mean, I guess you found good results with that, but it wasn't quite what you were looking for, and that led you to designing your own, or?
Yeah, so like I said, I was into taking different supplements so I could get more work done. So one day I was listening to a podcast from Tropical Talk Radio. They were talking about taking smart drugs to get more work done.
Yeah,
it was just like a light bulb moment went off in my head. I was like, all right, these guys are talking about it. I've been doing it. Maybe there's more people out there that are also looking into doing it. And then just decided to go for it. Decided to create our own supplement. Started doing research, like I said, even more research to broaden, to see, I was taking certain things, but I knew there was more things out there that could be taken. So
now, let me interrupt real quick. I'm assuming you don't have like a medical background or some degree hanging on your wall that I don't know about. The internet says a million things about any given subject, and obviously when you're telling people, here's something that you should take, which is going to have an effect on your brain, you want to be. There's a lot of ethics involved in that. Did you go to any higher authority to kind of figure out if what you were going to recommend, the dosages within that supplement, were appropriate to be offering to people?
Yeah, I mean, just doing research on a lot of authoritative sources. What are the threshold dosages, and what are the dosages that actually people notice? We basically wanted to increase neurotransmitters, right? So dopamine, acetylcholine, alpha-GPC, huperzine A, vinpocetine, caffeine. Those all increase acetylcholine and dopamine levels. But then we also wanted to have, we didn't want the jittery feeling that you get when you drink too much caffeine. So we added in some other things that are more relaxant type of neurotransmitter, for example, like the GABA and the oat straw. Those things are supposed to help reduce anxiety, those type of things.
Gotcha. So it's sort of like an antidote to the jitters that come with some of the things that are more stimulants for the brain.
Right. Kind of balance it out a bit.
You hear different things as far as on some of the internet forums of what amounts people should take. I mean, I guess part of it's just, how many milligrams of something you can fit in a pill before it becomes the size of a horse pill. Any interesting stories there about how you figured out the dosage size or the pill size, or?
A lot of research just seeing like what stacks other people were taking, what was working for us as well, certain amounts that would work well. When we created, we wanted to make sure that it was well tolerated, right? Like people weren't not going to have negative reactions. We did choose ingredients that were all well tolerated, and also the amounts that we chose. We didn't go overboard with any of the amounts. The amounts are not too low, not too high. We determined that based upon previous experience as well as research on what others are doing.
Cool. On your website, do you go into detail on that for anybody that wants to sort of look up further information on the constituents within BrainStack?
We've got an ingredients page on the site. It doesn't go in super in depth. For now, it's just a very quick ingredients list with some external links to Wikipedia pages and studies.
Cool. And how would you describe? You're going to be so biased in this. I feel hesitant to answer. But how would you describe what you wound up with as far as how close did you come to the mark of what you were trying to achieve, and like what kind of feedback have you gotten from other users?
So we were taking, before actually creating the product, we had all the different single ingredients. So it wasn't too much of a surprise, right? So when we got the product, it wasn't like, oh, okay, it was pretty much exactly what we were wanting. It's not something like Adderall where you feel euphoric and you feel really laser-like. It's much more subtle.
Would you say, and I mean, this stuff is always so tough to self-analyze, but if somebody were to give you BrainStack without your knowledge at the start of a day, and you went through your day not knowing you had been dosed with it, I mean, do you feel like most people would notice a subjective difference in how they feel, or would they just feel like I'm pretty on point today?
It's a tough one. I would say maybe not. Maybe people wouldn't.
Yeah. Which I guess is really probably ideal. I mean, you don't necessarily want to feel like you're going around
Right, you don't want to feel
on drugs.
Feel like you're on drugs, right? Well, first, so back to that study in China where they did the study with huperzine. Overwhelming majority of the students had increased their memory scores on this test.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to ask them if they felt like their memory had increased or had improved, I would venture to guess a lot of them would say no, or they didn't notice anything.
Yeah.
Even though the test scores showed otherwise.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's one of those things with people are notoriously bad at estimating their own cognitive virtues on things. It's like how 80% of Americans think they're better drivers than average. It's like they couldn't do mathematically. Of course, that's not true, but people are just rotten at self-analysis. It's interesting that you describe yourself kind of as both ADHD and a workaholic. It's a funny combination. Is there anything else besides BrainStack that's sort of part of your personal productivity regimen, chemical or otherwise?
Yeah, there are quite a few things that I do in addition to simply taking BrainStack. I wake up in the morning, have some coffee. I eat lunch at about 2 o'clock or breakfast. I don't know, as my first meal of the day.
Oh, that is your first meal of the day. What's the rationale behind skipping breakfast?
The rationale behind skipping breakfast. Okay, that's another topic that we could talk about for 30 minutes to an hour.
We won't give it 30 minutes, but
we'll do a quick one. Intermittent fasting, right? So I've been doing this for about 2 years.
Okay.
Huge productivity hack. I feel like I get at least a couple more hours of productivity in every day.
Really?
Because of this. I know that sounds extreme, but
that does sound extreme.
You think about it, how much time you spend cooking, right? You're cooking a lot less meals, for example. And then also, after you eat breakfast, your blood kind of rushes from your head to your stomach, right? It has to process this food that you've just put into your body.
Yeah.
And that definitely takes away from your mental capabilities.
Can't think and digest at the same time.
Right, yeah. So yeah, skipping breakfast, I can get a solid 6 hours of work in. If I wake up at 6 in the morning, I get on, drink coffee and tea and take BrainStack and paracetam, these different things. I can work until maybe 2 o'clock solid without getting fatigued mentally at all.
So at that point, you really haven't put any calories into your body since dinner the night before, or maybe a dessert at, like 10, 11 o'clock. So, I mean, you're going, shucks, that's like 14 hours without any sort of calories going in. You don't feel like tired from low blood sugar or anything like that?
Not at all. At first, there was an acclimation period, like a period of time where it took a little bit of time to get used to it.
Yeah.
Maybe the first week was like that, or maybe the second week. But your body adapts very quickly. I noticed that when I started, if I were to eat big meals the night before, I wasn't feeling that way in the morning, right? So it takes a long time to digest food. It
Sure.
takes a lot of time. And so for me, I didn't feel mentally sluggish. Quite the opposite.
That's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before. And anytime somebody says they gain an hour or two in their day, it's like that always it perks up my ears. Even I mean, it's like wow.
I wholeheartedly recommend intermittent fasting for productivity boost and also fat loss. That's kind of what it's created for. And just since we're on the subject of food and diet, I want to consume a certain number of calories per day. And skipping a meal is like I'm not getting those calories unless I make up for it. Later in one of my next subsequent meals. So I'll do, for example, at lunch, I'll also make like a brain shake, quote unquote. All right,
made with real brains?
No brains were harmed during the making of these shakes. So I'll put coconut milk, blueberries, raspberries, eggs, and flaxseed, right? So I'm getting omega-3s.
Yeah.
I'm getting the MCTs from the coconut milk. I'm getting
Getting something we can't pronounce.
pterostilbene from the blueberries. And choline from the eggs. So all these different things, each one of these things has like a particular thing that it contributes to as far as the brain goes.
Any chance that we're going to have a special recipe for Gabe's brain shake that we can put in the notes on the website?
Yeah, maybe I'll coin it, kind of like the bulletproof coffee.
Yeah, exactly. No, it sounds like a good mix. So you put just eggs directly into the shake, just mix it up?
Yeah, raw eggs, man.
I seem to remember something about like salmonella. You're not supposed to eat raw eggs and cookie dough or something like.
I've heard both sides to the coin. I haven't had any issues at all. I've been doing this for 6 months, 5 months since I got here.
And he's still alive.
Raw eggs, yeah. I haven't had any problems with that at all.
Well, anything else you want to come back to and touch on that we might have glossed over or train ran off the tracks?
Green tea, that's a huge one. I can't talk highly enough about it. There's so many studies to back it up. Here's an interesting thing I read the other day. So green tea has been shown to increase alpha brainwaves. Alpha brainwaves are associated with very calm, relaxed state of mind and focus, as opposed to beta brainwaves, which are like very erratic and kind of like the fight or flight type of response. We're very like
nervousness.
Yeah, nervousness, exactly. So a recent study, scientists were able to successfully predict how well somebody would learn, how fast they're able to learn based upon their alpha brainwaves. Right? And so green tea increases alpha brainwaves. Alpha brainwaves, they can determine that how fast you're going to learn something. So that's a big one. I'll let that one sink in for a little bit.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal.
Last but not least, so are you on BrainStack, under the influence of BrainStack right now, even during this interview?
Yeah, I am.
Truth in advertising here.
Yeah, definitely. Some Piracetam BrainStack, and today was coffee. I like to switch it up between coffee and green tea.
Cool. So if we think that Gabe sounds really, really smart during this interview, then we have to give at least some of the credit to BrainStack supplement.
And if I sound ridiculous in the interview,
then he clearly hasn't taken enough.
Lack of sleep. We'll chalk it up to that.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and that's all for now.
Smart Drug Smarts. Ruthless listener retention gimmick.
Okay, so this is interesting. Earlier in the episode, I promised I was going to tell you about the nootropic that could help prevent unwanted pregnancy. And you probably rolled your eyes and said, Jesse, there's no such nootropic. I know there's not. Stop trying to fool me. But there kind of is. Okay, so the nootropic in question is, drumroll please, hormonal contraception, aka the birth control pill. What am I talking about? Okay, so these are researchers at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, recently published in the Journal of Women's Health. They found, as part of the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention, they did neurological tests on 261 cognitively normal women, the ages of 40 through 65. What they found is that hormonal contraceptive users performed significantly better than those who never used hormonal contraceptive when they were younger, particularly in the domains of visuospatial ability and speed and flexibility. There were duration-dependent increases in performance, especially in the users who had used more than 15 years of hormonal contraception earlier in life. So really, really pretty interesting stuff, I think. I mean, this is showing long-term benefits to the women from these drugs that they took years and decades ago, in fact. But obviously, the benefits are sticking around until their old age. When these neurological tests were done, one can assume probably that there were benefits during the time they were taking the drug and not just showing up decades later. That wouldn't really make much sense. Among the questions this doesn't answer is what the exact mechanism that's causing these benefits is. They don't even pretend to answer this. They're just showing a correlation in this study. But anyway, I'll put the link to the study on the website. Really interesting stuff. So if you're a woman and you feel like you don't want to be getting pregnant, then possibly double up and get some nootropic / pregnancy prevention at your local doctors.
Smart Drug Smarts.
All right, that is this episode in the can for the record books. Very first episode of 2013. Looking forward to being with you guys all year this year. We got some good stuff coming up. Got a couple of interviews which are lined up for the very, very near future that should be some really interesting ones, including one with a renowned futurist, somebody that just likes sitting around thinking about the future. And even though that's not directly smart drugs stuff, it's kind of I don't know, I can't help but feeling like the kind of people that are interested in this podcast are going to kind of get the rocks off a little on really doing some deep thinking on where humanity and the human brain and the collective hive mind of planet Earth is heading. So without getting woo-woo at all, I want to do some hard thinking about what kind of things our brains are going to be doing in the next 20, 50, 100 years. Anyway, that's coming up in an episode soon, and be talking to you next week. Have a very, very awesome week, everybody.
You've been listening to the Smart Drug Smarts podcast. Visit us online at www.smartdrugsmarts.com and subscribe to our mailing list to keep your neurons buzzing with the latest in brain optimization.